to introduce, oh, there we go. Dr. Barbara Morgan Gardner is a professor of church history and doctrine here at BYU. She received her PhD in instructional psychology and completed postdoctoral work at Harvard University. She served as institute director in Boston, which included her assignment as the chaplain at both Harvard and MIT, and continues to serve as chaplain at large in higher education for the church. She authored the book, The Priesthood Power of Women in the Temple, Church, and Family, which is a fantastic book, by the way. And she hosts a podcast, Grounded, which is popular for amongst all ages. My mother once asked me, she said, Justin, do you know Barbara Morgan Gardner? And I said, yes, I do. I work with her. And my cool factor with my mom increased like exponentially at that point. She's constantly presenting around the world. And one of the things I really appreciate about her whenever I get to interact with her is she's got her finger on the pulse of church members all around the world, and particularly of women. And I always leave my conversations with her edified and broadened in my horizons. In the last General Conference, Elder Razband spoke of the General Relief Society presidency at the time the family of Proclamation to the world was given. And much of that came from the scholarship that Dr. Morgan Gardner has done, and I'm excited to continue learning about that today. And just let me say, she's one of the most outstanding people I know. Every time I meet with her, I feel edified, uplifted, and a little bit smarter. And I'm just so grateful that we'll get the opportunity to hear from her today. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Barbara Morgan Gardner.
Thank you, Justin. It's so kind. I feel smarter every time I'm with you too, and nicer. Justin's a nice person. I'm so happy to be here with you today. This is a topic I care a lot about, and I believe that it's a topic that is extremely important because it's an inception story of how we received one of the most important documents ever to be written and recorded. So I want to just share, as I'm starting off here, a little bit of my experience. Oops, I'm going to pull this up and plug that back in. Maybe I shouldn't have pulled it up. I will. I'll unplug and plug. There we go. I think we're getting it. There we go. Okay. As many of us who are older than many of you who are here in the audience, I remember when I was a BYU student and I was visiting my sister. She was trying to set me up on a date and was determined that I was going to marry the person she set me up on a date with. And he was waiting for me as we listened to this women's conference, this women's section of General Conference. And I was listening intently to the speakers. I was young, and I was impressed that the focus was on family. And I remember when President Hinckley started speaking, I was actually outside. I remember I was outside sitting on the grass. The volume was turned up, and I was just reflecting. And I remember thinking to myself, there is something extremely important about what he's saying. Many of us say it wasn't anything different. And I think that's true. I think at that time, this was just the most common truth that was being expressed by the prophet. But at the same time, I remember thinking, this is extremely important. And this is something that we are going to be studying and using in the future. I remember immediately having a testimony of what was being taught and recognizing also that I had a responsibility to bear testimony of what was being taught in this family proclamation. I also recognized in that moment how grateful I was to be raised in a family where the family proclamation was being lived, whether intentional or not, because we were raised to live many of these principles of the family proclamation. I'm the 12th of 13 children. I have parents who are active in the church. My dad was a convert. He joined the church shortly after his mother took her life. And he was raised in a very different way, and his family made a decision at a young age that he would have a different family than he was raised in. My father and mother eloped while they were here as students at BYU, both of them not having the family support they needed to come to their temple wedding. And so they just went to the temple by themselves. I'm so grateful for their decision to follow these principles of the Family Proclamation before the proclamation was written. The Family Proclamation is doctrinal, as Elder Razvan said. It is doctrine. And the principles are unchanging principles. The principles were true before the Family Proclamation was written. I say this also because I am also an individual who was single here at BYU and continued to stay single all through my adult years until I was 40. I know what it's like to go to church and not have somebody to sit by. I know what it's like to try to have children and not be able to have children. I know what it's like to be the last one married in a family of 13 and have nieces and nephews that are getting married and having children before you are. I know that. I know the heartache of some of the experiences people have. And I still love, and even perhaps because of that, really love the Family Proclamation, because true principles give hope through the atonement of Jesus Christ. And that's what this did for me then, and it's what it continues to do for me now. So there has been, over the last few years especially, I would say, a little bit of confusion regarding the inception of and the preparation of the Family Proclamation, and also especially the delivery of the Family Proclamation. I have become aware of this as I study a lot of women's issues in the church. And I heard some stories and I heard some experiences that individuals shared regarding just some ideas and some concepts that didn't quite settle right with me. And I have come to learn that when something doesn't quite settle right with me, I want to know the truth. I just want to get to the bottom of things. That's kind of who I am. I just want to know for myself. A little bit Joseph Smith and like you are in here. So I decided to actually go to the person who would have the most concrete information that was still alive at the time. The person that I chose to go to was President Elaine Jack. I knew that she was living during the time of the Family Proclamation. I knew that she was the General Relief Society president when the Family Proclamation was being written. And I knew that the meeting that was being held was actually under her direction and under her planning. And I wanted to talk with her. Now, I didn't just call her randomly. She had actually invited me to speak with her and be in her home a few times before that. I'd had a wonderful experience getting to know her. I had sat with her and discussed topics of priesthood and relief society and literacy and education and women's responsibilities in the family and the church prior to me making this phone call. So I had a little bit of context before I called her. When I called her, I just explained to her that there seemed to be maybe a little bit of miscommunication regarding the planning for and the delivery of the Family Proclamation. And I wondered if she could just give me a little bit of time that I could show her and help her just to see some of the things that have been said and just see if she could help clarify for me and perhaps for others. So I did. I went to her home. We had a wonderful conversation. She was ecstatic to be able to bear her testimony and clarify any truths that she could come up with or help with in the Family Proclamation. And one of the things that I loved that she would say over and over again was this: Barb, I was the president. I wrote in my journal the day of and the week of. My mind is clear. I know what I'm talking about. I was the president. That becomes important to this because from her perspective as the General Relief Society president of the church, her memory and her journals really, really matter. So I'm going to share with you, just to start off, a video. So I actually, this video is a little tender to me. I had asked her if we could do some interviews, and I actually performed multiple interviews just to clarify, just to make sure we had it right. This is one of many, but this is actually one where she said, "Can I put some makeup on and do my hair and get good in front of the camera?" And she did. This was also, by her request, a video that she hoped that at some point I would share with people. She actually asked if she passed away between the times of the interviews and the 30th anniversary of the Family Proclamation, that I would take on the responsibility of sharing her testimony and sharing her experience. So this is not only validated by Elaine Jack, but it is done upon request of President Elaine Jack. So I'm going to share with you just a few videos, and I'm going to kind of talk through this as we go along. So the first one is just her introducing herself and talking a little bit about her presidency at that time. Elaine, thank you. It's not set up to the system. Shoot, I should have checked that.
We should take that as well. Let's see here.
I know it's one of these.
I wonder if we can just go on this.
Oh, that's a good idea. I'm smarter when Justin's around. Okay, we're just going to do that. That's great, Justin. Thank you for doing this interview with me. So wonderful.
Thank you.
Would you just tell us a little bit about your presidency, the years you were there, maybe even a theme or two that you were focusing?
In 1990, I had served with Brigham Young Women. Prior to that time, it was the best preparation I could have had about the working of headquarters when I moved into Relief Society. So 7 years, we had 1990 to 1997. And at the beginning of our presidency, we decided we needed to have some purposes, a mission, what we wanted to accomplish. And so we had a retreat, the presidency, and decided that there were several things that we felt strongly about. And so our purposes were outlined, and the first one was to build personal testimony. And we felt that's the basic need for every woman. We also wanted to bless the individual woman and understand that every woman, no matter her circumstances, was a member of Relief Society and needed Relief Society. Of course, our third thing was to develop and exercise charity, basis of all Relief Society things. And our fourth purpose was to strengthen families. And that was a very important one too. We thought as we strengthen individual women, families would be blessed as well. And so as events turned out, strengthening families was reinforced for us a great deal.
Well, and frankly, that the timing of you really focusing on families fits perfectly into the Proclamation of the Family that came out in 1995.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the main reasons for this interview is to talk about your experience, what you remember about that proclamation coming forward, as you were the president at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And you also had two counselors. Who were your counselors?
Had Eileen Clyde and Chico Okazaki, good women with a variety of experience that really, I think, was a strength for our presidency.
Perfect. Okay, so I remember you talking a little bit about in preparation for this general conference that was being held, and this would be September 1995. Is that right?
Yes, it was General Relief Society meeting.
Okay, so the General Relief Society meeting. That's right. What were you doing in preparation for it? I know you have some things here in your journal that you wrote. What do you remember about it? I remember you talking about a video that you were putting together. What can you tell us?
Yeah.
Lane, thank you for doing this. I didn't mean to do that, but I meant to do this. I want to stop that in the middle just to explain a couple of things. So first of all, Elaine had these counselors that are fantastic. And when I was doing these interviews, both of the counselors had passed away. So that's an important part of this as well. And those two other counselors had done some interviews and some presentations at other times. Another thing that's important for us to talk about here is there was this video, and she's going to explain this. It's important though to know that she is going to be, anytime you see her reading or quoting, she's reading and quoting out of the journal that she wrote the day of, like I said before, or the week of. So she is I think at this time she's 94 years old. So she's much older, but she's going back to the journal that she wrote in September, between September 17th and September 25th of 1995. So she is reading the journal that she wrote when she was the General Relief Society president and her daily memories of this experience. Okay, so here she goes again. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to fast forward this a little bit and try to get to that same spot, or at least close to it. Some things here in your journal that you wrote. What do you remember about it? I remember you talking about a video that you were putting together. What can you tell us?
Yeah, we had some concern about the meetings just being talking heads, and we thought maybe we had a variety or something different. And we thought, let's do a video about Relief Society about some of the concerns and how we might deal with them. And so we worked. I mean, any video takes a lot of work.
Of course.
And so we were putting that together. But as it came together, I didn't really feel comfortable about how it was going. And it was causing some concern, even in the office somehow. But I was very unsettled about this.
Elaine, it seems like, if I remember right, you wrote this in your journal a little bit
It
about
did,
it. Can
but
you read that? I mean, I asked you to
yes.
read a few things for us. So
Mhm.
can you read
Yeah.
that for us?
Well, I said this video had caused some consternation in the office. I've had some very unsettled feelings about the direction it was going and feel perfectly confident about the decision made not to use the film, which had been made prior to that time.
And who made that decision to not use the film?
We in the Relief Society.
Okay.
Mhm.
What was the date of that?
That would have been September 18th.
Okay, that you wrote.
That I wrote this, and what had happened was before that.
Of what year?
1995.
Okay, so it was right after, right in that process of the family proclamation and things. So it was
Well,
in preparation.
Our preparation for the meeting
Okay.
came prior to that time, and then the proclamation was.
So to clarify, this may not sound extremely important, but this is actually an extremely important clarifying point. There was, a few years later, an idea that they had created this video, and the video was canceled by other people. And Elaine wanted it known that no one canceled the video without her being the one who made the decision to cancel the video. In fact, in this interview, she says we did in the General Relief Society presidency. And then I asked her more specifically, I said, can you tell me a little bit more about that? And she said, I was so concerned about the video that even though my counselors were fine with it, I was not comfortable. It caused major heartache for me, and I canceled it. I did. That's extremely important because remember, again, she was the General Relief Society president. It was under her direction that the video was started, and it was also under her direction that the video stopped. There were other people who were a part of that and later did not give permission for that video to be used. But the first person to stop the video from being used was President Elaine Jack herself because of the feelings that she was feeling. In fact, she says, and in other interviews, she says, it was just, we were using stories about families that were so isolated and sounded so extreme and edgy that we no longer were using the family stories that were happening among members of the church. We were perhaps going a little bit too far to make things interesting instead of to be helpful. So that's coming from President Elaine Jack. And that's an extremely important part because if we lose this video, we lose 15 to 20 minutes of what they were planning on doing for this conference. It's also important because they had made this plan with the intention of speaking on the family proclamation. They had made this plan with the intention of speaking about family. Their talks were already written. Everything had been submitted. Everything was ready to go with the exception of this video. So in this process of creating this video and being stressed out about what to do with this extra 20 minutes that they had to pay for at the time, and it cost a lot of money for the church to be paying for the satellite and everything else, they were hoping and praying and trying to figure out what to do. So in this process of trying to figure out what to do, President Elaine Jack actually talked with Elder Hales and he gave her a priesthood blessing. He was her direct contact with the Quorum of the 12 at that time. She had a couple of different direct contacts during this time. President Hales did give her a blessing and invited her to have a conversation with the first presidency. Now, this was a big deal, to be clear, because the first presidency at this time, if you remember from Elder Rasband's talk, they'd only been in the first presidency for 6 months. President Hinckley was a newly called prophet, and prior to President Hinckley, we had President Hunter and President Benson. And if you know anything about President Benson, I do, because this was my youth. We didn't hear from President Benson very, very much because he was ill for much of his later years. And so because of that, the Relief Society presidency also didn't have a lot of time to be able to speak with the brethren, with the first presidency. Not because they didn't want to, but because they were not healthy. They couldn't. And so President Elaine Jack finally, as she is preparing for this conference, is invited or suggested to be invited by Elder Hales to meet with the first presidency. The First Presidency actually does invite them, and they sit down, and this is the Wednesday before this conference. Now, to be very clear, this is extremely important. People say, well, this is the Wednesday. And there are some that may think, well, if it's just a few days, he totally took control of that meeting. He didn't. The meeting was still under the control of Sister Elaine Jack. She makes that very clear. President Hinckley had been invited by the First Presidency to be speaking at that, but it was still Elaine Jack's meeting. And the First Presidency, now President Hinckley, is going to ask Elaine Jack and Eileen Clyde and Chieko Okazaki what they think about the possibility of him presenting a document that they had been working on for a long time. So I want you to watch this next little part of this video.
So I know going forward, you have a lot of
Sorry, struggling with this video here a little bit. Just bear with me.
This was a wonderful opportunity, one which we have hungered for actually in the past. Although the questions were primarily directed to me, I tried to be aware of having Chieko and Eileen speak on the subjects rather than my representation only. As usual, they were very articulate and very discerning about the needs of women.
So they had this meeting. President Hinckley, President Monson, President Faust, of the First Presidency at the time. And then we also had Sister Elaine Jack, Chieko Okazaki, and Eileen Clyde. And at the time, Elder Dallin H. Oaks was also in that meeting. He was then the direct contact also with this Relief Society presidency. And he was assigned and asked to be in this meeting with them. So in this meeting, Sister Elaine Jack and President Elaine Jack talks about how well they were listened to. In fact, she's not the only one. It's actually, to me, it's very fascinating that we have other women that were in that meeting, those two women who expressed their own feelings as well. Sister Eileen Clyde said this. She said, President Hinckley explained to them, the real reason I've talked with you for a long time is that we have written a proclamation on the family, and it's my responsibility to decide when to present it. And you've already invited me to speak at your meeting on Saturday. I don't want to overwhelm your meeting. We want to hear from you, sisters, and we want the sisters to hear from you. So you've already asked me to speak, and I prepared remarks, but this is a very important thing. If I were to announce this proclamation to the family, I'm afraid it would overwhelm the meeting. And then Eileen says, Elaine and then Chieko and then I spoke to that, and we said, President Hinckley, this is obviously very important, and our concern for the family is very important. We can easily pair our talks so that you can use the talk you've prepared, but take the time you need if you choose to do this at our meeting to present your proclamation on the family. We quickly acquiesced to the importance of it, and especially we thanked him for his sensitivity because he clearly didn't want to come there and take over the meeting. This is the writing of Sister Eileen Clyde that she recorded shortly after this meeting that is found at the University of Utah. She was very pleased with the meeting. I talked to Elaine Jack about the feelings that Eileen Clyde and Chieko Okazaki had, and she said, we all left in a very joyful spirit. She said that in a variety of ways. Here is one quote. We felt very satisfied, listened to, and warmly received by the First Presidency. As these women left the meeting, President Oaks actually stopped them and said that he wanted to talk with them briefly about this meeting. And he shared with them that this was a very unusual decision by the prophet, that they had been working on this proclamation for a number of years, for a couple of years, and that it actually was sitting in the drawer of President Hinckley, and he and they, members of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12, had been literally fasting and praying to know when to give this proclamation. And so as the First Presidency invited the General Relief Society presidency to that meeting and had that discussion, President Hinckley apparently felt strongly that that is the meeting that he should present the family proclamation in, if President Elaine Jack and her presidency wanted him to do so and would allow him to do so. Now, there's a miracle here that is sometimes perhaps missed. Elaine was concerned because she had canceled the video and she had no way to fill the time because all of their talks had already been approved through correlation, and you can't just all of a sudden add a talk and get it to go through correlation typically in such a short period of time. Having served on correlation, I know how that works. So they're just a few days before this conference is supposed to happen. And now we have a prophet who is feeling inspired that he should read the family proclamation in addition to his given talk, which fills the time that they actually needed and that she was praying for. She saw this as a miracle. She saw this as a direct answer to her prayer. And she saw this as such a great honor for this family proclamation to be read in this meeting, in the meeting that she considered, in a sense, hers. So I'm going to share with you this really quickly. She's going to reiterate what I just said, but I want you to hear it from her.
So Elaine, there may be some who may have felt later that perhaps the proclamation was in some sense demeaning, or that perhaps it should have been shared somewhere else. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, we felt honored that it was read at our meeting. I think that was far more significant than if it had been read some other place. We felt, well, honored is the word.
So having it at the meeting then was something that you were grateful for, not something you felt was an imposition or in any way.
Oh, no, we thought, I mean, the proclamation on the family is a pretty big deal. And we didn't even know then how big a deal it was going to be. And so we felt it was really our pleasure to have had President Hinckley speak that at our meeting. Mm-hmm. And actually ask us, would you have time for this? I mean, of course we'd have time for this.
Okay, so I asked Elaine another question that I think is extremely important. I said to her, Elaine, do you feel like you were coerced into having this family proclamation shared? And she laughed and she said to me, who do you think I am, a shrinking violet? And she says, I'm from Canada. I worked hard my whole life. My mom was sick. I'm a hard worker. I'm a very confident person. She said, I've lived the gospel of Jesus Christ and studied the gospel my entire life. I am a confident individual. I am not a shrinking violet. And then she reminded me of the experience that she had with Elder Ballard, when Elder Ballard was asking about family and missions, especially for missionaries. And Elder Ballard said, do you have any suggestions? And as she was walking out the door in this missionary meeting, she turns around and says to him, we are their mothers. Like, listen to me a little bit. She was so clear, and she wanted everyone to know. She thought for herself. She had no problem talking to President Hinckley. She considered him a wonderful man and friend. She had other opportunities to speak with him. She was in many meetings with members of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. Not in the same as we do today. They actually have more opportunities today than they had in the past, but she had many opportunities to be meeting with them. She had been to his office. Members of the Quorum of the 12 had been to her office, and she never felt like she could not express exactly what she felt at any time. That was very critical for her to share as a woman. As a woman leader, she felt heard, she felt respected, and she was completely confident in her ability to speak truth and to be listened to. That was, I think, in probably the 10 interviews I did with her, that was reiterated every interview without fail. Even as I was leaving the door, she would remind me of that, just in case somebody thought that somebody was telling her that she had to do something that she wasn't in agreement with, or in any way was a shrinking violet. She just wasn't. In fact, I should tell you, this is kind of a funny story. Maybe some of you may not find a lot of humor in this, but maybe it's because I'm a little bit older, I do. I had a number of my students who actually went to visit Elaine Jack at her home last year. And one of the students just said to her, I'm kind of struggling with life, and sometimes I just don't want to work very hard, and I just really don't want to take my classes, and I don't really want to do my tests. And she just kind of went on, and she said, what do you say to that? And she goes, Elaine responded, it's time for you to get a life and get to work. And it was just this, like, that's her personality. She doesn't put up with anything from anyone. When I would go to her for the first time, she would say to me, Barb, go to my refrigerator, grab a Diet Coke, give one to me, take one for you. And then if you could help me clean up the pillows, I'd really appreciate it. She's just that kind of personality. She's just confident. She knows what she wants and she says it, and she's kind and she's thoughtful and she's very discerning. That was important that you understand that about her. Okay. So they actually had this General Relief Society meeting, as we are aware of. And in that meeting, Sister Jack and Eileen Clyde and Sister Chika Okazaki all shared their talks. Now, something that I think is important that sometimes can easily be misunderstood. When anyone is speaking at general conference, I don't know if I should say anyone, most anyone, they have their talks written in advance and they receive feedback on their talks. As they were preparing to give their talks, Sister Okazaki was given feedback, apparently by President Oaks, where he just simply said, now that we know that the Family Proclamation is going to be read at this conference, there may be a couple of things or an item in your talk that may cause people to be distracted by what the Family Proclamation is going to say. And he actually said to her, if you don't take that part of your talk, it may be so distracting that on Monday, the Salt Lake Tribune is actually going to write about what you said instead of the Family Proclamation. Sister Okazaki, I have not interviewed, although I have met her. I've driven in the car with her. I've driven her a number of places. I love her to death. For whatever reason, it seems as if that part of the talk was not taken out. And that's fine. That's great. But in the local newspaper the next day, the Family Proclamation was not mentioned and her talk was. And the one sentence that she was told to take out stayed. And that was one of the headlines, or part of the headline. And Elaine just said, we really do believe that we have prophets, seers, and revelators. Another thing that's extremely important as this Family Proclamation is being read, and this is interesting because in the interview with Elaine, she had not realized this yet. I asked her if she had any help, if she had helped in any way to write the Family Proclamation. And she said no. She said, not at all. No one ever asked. And she said, as far as I know, it was only written by the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. Well, lest people, and again, I'm saying this because this is a little bit of my background, working especially with Latter-day Saint women and understanding what's going on, lest people think this was a women's issue. And if it was, that's great. And if it's not, that's great. I just want to know, I just want to get to the bottom of it. I asked every other person who typically would read or review a proclamation or anything spoken at General Conference to see if they had seen it beforehand. I interviewed Ed Brandt, who was the head of the Correlation Department, who typically reads and understands everything that is coming across that's going to be read at General Conference. I interviewed or talked with Bruce Olson. He was the church's public affairs administrator, who also would be someone who would have known in advance what the Family Proclamation said. I interviewed Bob Millett, who was very well known for his work on family and dean of the BYU religious education. I interviewed Bruce Hafen, who was very well respected in the field of family as well. I interviewed Sherry Dew. I interviewed multiple people, and every one of them said it was written by the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12, and none of them saw it, none of them read it, and none of them gave feedback. In fact, Elaine says in one of these interviews I did with her, she said, some may think and some may wish that the women had the opportunity to give feedback on the proclamation. And she said, it could have been helpful. Maybe that would have been nice. But she said, I want to make it clear that I was not expecting that. I am not upset by that at all. And she said, more importantly, I'm grateful that we did not, because had any of us put pen to that paper in any way, shape, and form, it likely would have polluted it. And people would have said that it did not come from the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12, but rather it came from someone else. So she said, in her personal opinion, she was very grateful that she was not given that to look at beforehand, because she felt it actually cleaned and clarified that it was a doctrine, the principles were true, and it came directly from the Lord through his First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 as revelation. I think that's critical for us to understand. In no way, shape, or form was this president of the church in any way offended, hurt, or taken aback that she did not have a chance to review a document that is written by and signed by the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12. Okay, so then reflections on the meeting, on this general meeting.
Continuing from my journal, I wrote, When the proclamation was read on Saturday evening, it was worthy of all that had been said of it. It will be a fine foundation document for us in Relief Society and for the church as a whole. I see the Lord's hand in so much that we are doing. It has been directly intervening over the past 2 weeks where I have been in a great deal of turmoil. It would not have been right to have shown any video on Saturday night as good and polished a product as we might have had. It would have been a detraction. The brethren tried to explain this to us, and yet I still feel hesitant about having the meeting about just talking heads. This was what we were hoping to accomplish with some variety in our meeting. I find now that kind of meeting was the best received of all. The one that we ended up having. I also realized the promptings of the Spirit in having that woman write a history of her family and of her life to President Hinckley at just a time when we could use that letter. He covered a myriad of circumstances that women are finding themselves in currently and ended on an optimistic note of how she had triumphed and had been blessed, even though her husband had left her and she had many difficulties facing her. I don't think all these circumstances come by chance. We are blessed. After the General Relief Society meeting, I wrote my thoughts on September 25th, 1995. I felt very good about that meeting on Saturday. It went well. The messages were powerful, and we have had tremendous response from the women. We've heard frequently, that was the best meeting ever, and that's what we like to hear. The tabernacle was nearly filled. There were more women in attendance than we have had the last couple of years. The music was glorious. The numbers that were chosen and executed so beautifully seemed to enhance and emphasize the messages in a beautiful way. Jean Apolloni led this with distinction. What is most touching and moving for me is to see the look on the faces of the women in the choir, so intent on the conductor, eager to give their best. They are beautiful, dedicated women. To continue, I felt a calmness about the evening, did not feel nervous, and was able to conduct it well. I felt good about the way the conducting notes were structured so that I stood up enough and not too much. The only difficulty was the timing. Since we had decided not to use a video, we felt we had 15 extra minutes, and we had not scheduled too tightly. I think each of us in the presidency took a little more time. By the time we got to 10 after 7, it was time for the prophet to speak. And he had a 25-minute talk for which we had assured him there would be ample time. We were going to have to add our minutes and be a little more stringent on time in the future. This seemed not to matter to anyone. Satellite time was already purchased. The videos were 120 minutes, so in the long run, there was no loss. However, the meeting was a little longer than I had anticipated. The coup was President Hinckley and the fact that he read the Proclamation on the Family, which had been worked on in the Quorum of 12 for the last 2 or 3 years. This is a historic statement. This sort of proclamation is issued very infrequently. It was a reiteration of the standards, doctrines, and practices relative to the family. I felt that it was of great significance that it would be read during this meeting to the women. I expect it will be referred to in General Conference as well. As I contemplate the whole conference and the events that led up to it, I feel strongly the Lord's hand in what we are doing. He blesses beyond that which we know and recognize.
Okay. Later on this interview, she says, "This is a historic statement. This sort of proclamation is issued very infrequently. It was a reiteration of the standards, doctrines, and practices relative to the family. I felt that it was a great significance that it would be read during this meeting to the women. It was a blessing to have all 3 members of the First Presidency also in attendance. What incredible respect." So in finishing up, I actually want to show you how important this is. I was going to show you this earlier, but I'm just going to show you how important it is to some of these individuals to share that they were actually not able to and did not see the family proclamation. This one's from Bruce Olson, as I said earlier, the public affairs director. You listen to his wording and how important it is for everyone to know this. He says, I am responding to an invitation. I just asked him, did you? And so he took it so seriously. This is almost like the David Whitmer, Oliver Cowdery, where they want their testimony down, right? This is the same with Elaine Jack. I'm responding to an invitation to certify my knowledge of the creation of the family proclamation issued in 1995. At that time, I was serving as managing director of the public communications and special affairs, later changed to public affairs, and press secretary to the first presidency. I hope you understand, if somebody's going to know about this document, he would know. So he continues, public communications and special affairs had no part in creating the proclamation. It was written entirely by the members of the Council of the 12 Apostles and the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The members of the Public Communications and Special Affairs Committee as individuals or as a group did not work on it, and that included Elder Neil A. Maxwell, who was serving in the committee at that time. The afternoon of the General Relief Society meeting, I was invited to President Gordon B. Hinckley's office and given a copy of the document, which was embargoed until after President Hinckley had read it as part of his remarks in the General Relief Society meeting on September 21st, 1995. So finally, I just thought I would end with, I'll show you two pictures. One, this is for no purpose except that we have this. This is just one of the many interviews we have with Elaine where she's not quite as dressed up. But she actually wanted me to share this, that she was holding up her journal in her hands. She was reading it, and this was her life, and this was real, and this mattered to her. She wanted a picture taken of her with her own journal and talked about how she actually didn't keep a journal as often as she would like to, but for some reason she felt strongly at this time she needed to keep a very careful record of the events that happened that week. You've read this quote, we heard her say this quote earlier, but I'll just read it for her purposes. We have been well served by the advice of our brethren, and while I always value their comments and direction, it is powerfully shown to me from time to time how wise it is. And then finally, I asked her, this is just very briefly, I just asked her, what is your testimony of the family proclamation? She just shared this. She shared a variety of testimonies, but this is one I chose. The family proclamation is stating principles that are timeless. The principles that are outlined in that are really a recipe for basic foundational life, which brings happiness. It has factual and basic principles that can be proven that promote success for children and for parents as well. When children see parents succeed, it brings great happiness to them. So in all of this, I will begin where I will end where I started, just in my gratitude for the family, a proclamation to the world. I will also just express gratitude for these incredible women leaders who paid a very heavy price to learn about the needs of families throughout the world, who did their best to understand and speak to the needs and help the world and families so that they could actually have the happiness and the joy that we came to life to have. And I'm also extremely grateful for members of the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 then, who wrote the Family Proclamation, and those today, such as Elder Rasband that we just heard at the last General Conference, who continues to see that the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12's name is on the proclamation, and therefore that means him today, as he stated in the General Conference. Most importantly, I will testify of Jesus Christ. This is his gospel. This is the plan of our Father. He is the Savior of the world, and he makes it available for us to have eternal families, eternal joy, eternal hope. He is the promise and the fulfiller of all that is good. I recognize that in our lives, sometimes not everything is going as planned. And sometimes it takes a lot of patience and faith. But I testify that Jesus Christ is the one to teach us patience and faith. He is the one who went to Gethsemane for us. He is the one who understands trials and heartaches. And he, like we are studying in Come Follow Me this week with sections 121 to 123, he is the one who went to the depths of all so that he could bring us the greatest of joy. So I testify that this family proclamation is a proclamation from God through his prophets and his doctrine. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
We'd like to thank our wonderful Barbara Morgan Gardner for all that she has done. You've just heard from the person who knows more about this area than anybody else does. And actually, just yesterday, as I was scrolling through Facebook, as sometimes we are wont to do, I texted her something and said, "Your talk tomorrow is going to be so important because there's so many things out there that can create confusion." But Barb has done the wonderful work. I just want to give her a small token of our appreciation. We have the New Testament commentary series from BYU Studies. This is the book on the Revelation of John, and I always need commentary on this particular one. So we figured we'd give this to her, and just thank you again for everything.
Thank you, dear Justin. Thank you.
All right, we will be having another lecture series, another lecture next month. Stay tuned for that. And please feel free to go get some cookies. Thank you. Fantastic. You run. There's also a little note in there. Open that. There's a little note there. Open that.